Hello, everyone. My name is Alex Campora. My topic for this semester was cybersecurity, the emergence of the smart home and organization. So this presentation is going to go over how security is implemented in the home and organization and how it's continued to evolve. So let's go ahead and jump right in. So first question you have to ask yourself, when analyzing this, is what exactly makes up a smart home or organization? So the definition I found for a smart home or organization is a home or business that is equipped with lighting, heating, and electronic devices that can be remotely connected. This could be anything from your Amazon Echo to LED lights that are, controlled by your phone. These are devices that are attached to your wireless network that you can control, with either remotes, either, phones, computers, other devices. Many of them are quality of life, such as thermometers or automatic door locks, your home security systems, even remote controlled lights. But these devices also, leave your home open to vulnerabilities or your workplace as well. So, uh, commonly, this group of devices is what's referred to as an IoT. So, what exactly is an IoT? The IoT is what is commonly referred to as the Internet of Things. So, basically, this definition just comes out to be a system of interconnected devices. So, this could be all of your wireless devices that you have on your home network, anything really from baby monitors, video cameras, um, lamps, really anything that's is attached to that network that you can access remotely. So this, as I'm sure you can imagine, leads to many potential security vulnerabilities. So they create complex problems both for homeowners and system administrators. They tend to be more difficult to lock down. You don't really know, security professionals have trouble tracking all of them, especially, a large setting. It's a little bit easier to keep track of typically in the home because you have a finite number of people and devices in there. But in an organization of 1, 2, or 400 people, it can be very easy to lose track and not know exactly where everything is. So brings us to our first problem of security problems in the home that are associated with the Internet of Things or IoT. So security problems can occur with cameras, smart locks, baby monitors, you name it. Any of those devices previously listed that are associated with uh, any computer network leaves it vulnerable. For example, with cameras or baby monitors, it provides a way for someone to gain access to these devices via weak passwords or whatnot. It may be very easy for them to gain access to, let's say, listening in on your conversations. They, hackers or potential burglars could figure out pretty easily, when you're there. Maybe like combinations to like safes, possibly if you speak them out loud. Even just giving your passwords to somebody that's within the home, they can tap in and listen to these. And, before long, they have an entire database full of all of your sensitive information. So obviously, this can pose a very, uh, severe security threat. We run into the same thing with smart locks, with burglars or whatnot. If they can gain access to your home network, they can potentially unlock your doors. So if you have these smart locks, on your doors, on your windows, really any way that you can gain access to your home without proper security precautions in place, you're potentially leaving yourself vulnerable not just to cyber attacks, but also to physical intrusions upon your home or workplace. So, as I specified earlier, poor passwords are a major cause of concern with IoT. Many people, and we'll get to that. So, one of the more recent, or at least within the last few years, recent um, named attacks is the IoT security breach that involved a type of malware known as Mirai malware. Now, this was a large DDoS attack that occurred back in October of 2016. It targeted a large DNS provider known as DIN. This ended up not wiping out, but it ended up hitting and affecting many companies from North America as well as Europe as well. So some of the large name companies that were affected by this are ones such as Netflix, Reddit, New York Times. I think YouTube was actually affected by part of it, and they had downtime here and there. I guess it was intermittent throughout the day. There was attack early on, attack midday, attack at night, with outages lasting roughly around 2 or 3 hours per attack. For companies the size of Netflix, Reddit, and the New York Times, and even YouTube, I mean, these are large scale attacks. It was estimated that at least 100,000 IoT devices that were infected with Mirai malware were used in this DDoS attack. So that's 100,000 devices at minimum that were very easily accessed, probably due to poor passwords. Um, and they were able to be accessed and targeted for this DDoS attack. So some of the main culprits that were involved in this they found were baby monitors and security cameras. I think I even read reports that there was a wireless type like teddy bear that had a wireless system attached to it that was also involved. So looking at the IoT security in the home, one of the most overlooked security measures, that's not properly enforced, it involves the password protection. So many people get these devices, and as opposed to changing passwords right off the bat, or setting it to something secure, they leave default passwords in place. Well, this can be very bad because these default passwords are the same pretty much across devices. They're normally something such as admin password. They're very easy to figure out. A simple Google search, and the hacker that knows what device he's dealing with instantly has access to said device. So going along with what we've talked about so far, having a good strong password for your security in the home with these IoT devices is absolutely paramount. You can head off so many of these attacks before they even begin just simply by setting your password and not leaving it as default. I think that's something that really should be, you spoken about more so. I think that security professionals really need to convey that message, and if more people follow these good practices, attacks such as that Mirai malware back in 2016 would be far more difficult to carry out. So going along with good passwords, consumers can also have notifications set up. In this day and age, having smartphone technology is pretty much fully widespread. Almost everyone nowadays has a smartphone or some kind of smart device that they can receive these types of notifications on. So these notifications can go out when, like, let's say a couple goes out from their home, no one's home, but one of their doors gets unlocked or a window unlocks, remotely. These devices can go out and say, hey, this device was accessed, and instantly these people know, just similarly to how modern security like home systems work. These types of notifications can go out alerting the consumers that hey, somebody just accessed this device, respond back and blah blah blah, or the police will be called. So at least from that perspective, these can cut down on those home intrusions that could be potentially possible with these remote door and window locks being accessed. And it also helps just allow someone to realize that hey, my account's being attacked right now. I should probably change my password, change some settings, run some scans, make sure there's no malware being associated with this. So going along with the IoT security in the home, the last point I wanted to discuss is a strong firewall. When you combine a strong firewall on your home's network with these stronger passwords and these notifications, it's really this three-tier defense that you're building up that's going to work well for you in the end. The nice thing about the firewall is it kind of acts like that initial shield. So if you have a good firewall set up, a hacker has to try very hard to break through it. And then if you have a very strong password, on all of your devices, they're not going to be able to get near as much information on you or anything at all. And that's going to be really the the saving grace here. most of these attacks by hackers tend to be opportunistic. They're looking for weak targets that they can get in, get out fast, especially when they're trying to infect so many devices with this malware for these large scale attacks. They don't want to spend 100, 200 hours trying to crack someone's system that they may or may not even have anything on. They're going to look for the ones that have these weak passwords in place, that are very easy to get onto, that have a large amount of devices that are easily attacked. So if you make yourself a difficult target, you're probably going to get passed over more, even if the defenses aren't being tested fairly well. So I think that a strong security, strong amount of security, both in the home and organization, really begins with that strong firewall basis. So we've covered the security in the home fairly well, but growing security, with smart devices in the organization are also a thing. So this can affect businesses in the sense that there can be potential leaks of private customer data, which obviously can lead to potential for more lawsuits. So if you look at companies or businesses such as hospitals, they're dealing with tons of patient records, very confidential information. These types of security breaches that could leak all of that are severe violation of HIPAA laws. So and IT professionals, network engineers, pretty much everyone associated with the hospital, this leak of data can really lose their careers and their livelihoods by allowing these attacks to take place. So these unmanaged IoT devices can be used to probe the network. They can sniff traffic, and if they really want to, they can harvest all this data. So it's very important, in today's day and age where everything's so digitalized, that we really focus in on security in the organization, continue to evolve it to accommodate for these IoT devices that are inevitably going to be put on these networks. So going hand in hand with the earlier topic mentioned with the security in the home are strong passwords. Now it's a little bit different in the organization because there's typically an Active Directory set up, where there's a domain where all users are logged into. So it's on the system administrator at this point to enforce strong password requirements. So a system administrator can, educate, the workforce, the people working there, that they have to use an uppercase, a lowercase, number, special character, and it has to be a certain, length potentially. Obviously, the longer the password and the more complex, the far more difficult it's going to be to crack. So this is where it really the job really falls on the system administrators. They really need to be on their game. They need to make these strong regulations on the passwords, and it really does go a long way because if even just one person organization has a weak password, it ends up being it provides a potential hole for a hacker to get in, and once they gain access to that network, who knows what they can do. One of the issues with IoT devices on these large business networks is they're not very well enforced. So the AD might have a strong password, might require strong passwords to get on, but once you're there, your device, may have a pretty weak password, might be easily cracked. That ends up being, very difficult to deal with in the long run as a system administrator. So another issue with this is corporate espionage, which has been growing as of late. This, providing a strong password cuts down on the ability of other companies to gain access to your information, to launch attacks, to hedge you off, to steal customer data, pretty much everything we've already discussed. So another potential way to handle these IoT devices in the organization is to place them on their own separate network. So many companies will have their primary network where the workers and normal day-to-day operations are carried out on, but they'll also have a network typically for guests. So clients that come in or outside help or contractors will often work on these customer networks. Well, in addition to the primary network and the customer network, It would also be possible to set up a separate network that's specifically for IoT devices. So, what's the benefit of setting up these IoT devices networks? Well, first thing is these IoT device networks, they're independent from the primary network, which is, effectively the most important factor here. Having it separate from the primary network means that, even if someone gains access to this network, they're not going to see that traffic being passed. They're not going to even be aware that the other network exists, most likely. So, the network that's transmitting confidential information, patient records, etc., it's not going to be even snooped at all. So having these devices off on their own network really cuts down on the workload of the system administrator, especially because most of the infrastructure for these large-scale organizations is already in place to do this. This would be something that's a lot more difficult to implement, I would say, in the home. Many, typical homeowners don't, fully understand their network in the first place oftentimes. So in order to have them set up a separate network specifically for devices such as their baby monitors, cameras, and whatnot, uh, I think it becomes a lot more difficult for them to adequately implement. So what we get here with organizations though is most of this stuff is already in place. And I think that goes a long way in terms of security, in terms of businesses wanting to pursue this avenue. Is it's a very, easy setup and it's very, very highly effective. So I would definitely rate this. It's probably, next to passwords is the number 2 way that this should be handled. So last but not least, another important part to security in the organization with these IoT devices is keeping up to date firmware. So firmware is what sits on top of these hardware devices. It sits right on top of it. It's getting these like the latest firmware updates will help with security. It provides the latest security patches, bug fixes, etc. And you're really only susceptible to day one attacks. Whenever you're up to date on the latest firmware. Most of these patches, that are in firmware updates are covering up vulnerabilities that were exposed. So it's a lot better to have this done. Now this is difficult in a enterprise setup, just simply because there are so many devices to keep track of, and on top of that, you have to keep on top of each individual that's bringing in these devices to update their firmware. So from a system administrator perspective, this becomes very difficult to enforce. Far easier to, enforce in the home versus the workplace, I would say. So looking back, so some of my final thoughts. I think there are plenty of benefits to having IoT devices in the home and workplace. The IoT as Internet of Things has really been growing. It's here to stay, I would say. It's over the last just a decade, or even just the last 5 years, it's increased exponentially almost every year. There are so many smart devices being created, so many new things being put out on the market, and it really does add a certain degree of quality of life for both people in the business and home alike. So I think it's very important for security professionals today to develop solutions that really target how best to move forward with protecting these networks from attacks using this. They're not going to go away. It's only going to become more and more of a prevalent issue. So the advances we make today in the security industry, the methodologies we put into place and utilize, they are going to be used long term, assuming they are scalable. I think it's something to really keep in mind too when pursuing potential fixes and security measures, is that they have to be scalable. We have to look at it now, and if there's 8 billion devices out there, IoT devices, in even 10 years, we have to look at that being quadrupled at least. So these have to be scalable implementations. So I mentioned, briefly there are plenty of similarities. So most precautions can be taken both that were discussed over the course of this presentation. So you can good password security for both is vital. You can, you could apply pretty much all of the concepts to either or. Where I would really say the true differences lie are the separate networks. I know I touched on that lightly. I don't think separate networks in the home for the average user is near as viable as it is for a company that already has most of this in place. I think separate networks is a fantastic idea and it really cuts down a lot of the attacks, in the organization. I think it frees up the job for the system administrator to adequately do their job far easier. But I think from the homeowner's perspective, it's one of those ones that, you know, people involved in the IT field will likely take part in, but it's going to be very hard to get to be mainstream for, normal users. So going along with that, I also, on the flip side, I think that, keeping up to date firmware and enforcing that is very hard to do from a system administrator's perspective. It's just very difficult. I think it's going to be far better to, enforce this in the home versus the workplace. So that's just my final thoughts there. So, like I mentioned before, the future of IoT, I think it's bright. I think that IoT devices are going to continue to take off, and they're really going to be utilized by just about everyone in our future. So, with that, I'm going to leave you to it. Have a nice day.